everyone. Thank you for coming. Welcome. I'm Karen Klipple with the Carnegie Foundation. This is my colleague, Chris Thorne. I direct the Community College Pathways program there, and Chris heads up all of our analytics and technology work. I think that Chancellor Rodriguez's comments this morning really set the stage, the charge for what we want to talk about today. We know that community colleges are a really special place in America's higher education. We know that we educate almost half of the undergraduates, and that we do so in a way that enables students who otherwise wouldn't have an opportunity to get that higher education, to move on, to achieve their dreams. We also know that as a community, one of the challenges we face is completion. And part of that challenge is related to mathematics. Okay, so we know that mathematics is a huge barrier to student success, student completion. In fact, if we look at the numbers, and we know this from Tom Bailey's work at CCRC, that depending on your institution, and you know this from your own numbers, 60, even up to 80% of our students place into developmental mathematics. We also know that the chance of those students going on to earn, to complete their developmental math sequence and earn credit in one course in college level mathematics is only 20%. 80% never make it out. This is where we're losing our students. These are the students who can't go on to earn that degree or that credential that they need to get the jobs that they want, to have the lives that they want. And so we know this is impacting a huge number of students in our colleges. And we know that if we're going to do something about this problem, we're going to have to approach the problem in a really different way than we have before. So what we've done is we've been working in conjunction with 50 colleges who are part of our network to really co-design, co-develop a solution to this problem. All of us working together with this common goal of improving the student success rates of our developmental math students going to and through Dev Math into college credit. And so what we've done in working together, or one of the powers of us working together, is that we've been able to collect common data across common measures of our efforts, and really learn from the practitioners on the ground. This isn't some kind of intervention that could be thought up and handed to institutions to implement. This really needs to be developed and understood from the ground up. Taking expertise where it lies, which is in our institutions and in our classrooms right now, to collectively build a solution. And so what we're going to describe for you today is what these colleges have implemented, and then through this common data, take a really hard look at what we're learning about the implementation. So Chris is going to go into a lot of detail talking about the results of this program across our institutions, what we're finding out about how it's working, for whom it's working, and what that looks like. Again, a power of this common data and the common measures is for us not to just decide whether the program is effective or not, but where it's effective and why. You all know there's great variability across all of our institutions that impacts what a change like this looks like on the ground. So that means that we have the ability to learn where it works well and why, and then be able to apply that to other institutions. This is a really powerful piece of working together, and to give us the opportunity to continuously improve. Okay, so we can look at success now, we can see where it's happening better, and then apply our learnings from that. Is there anything you want to add at this point, Chris?
I think the thing we have been able, thinking about this from an improvement point of view, is a core tenet of improvement is that a majority of the expertise to solve problems is in the hands and hearts and heads of people in the setting. right? But what we have also done, because there is, in an improvement mindset, there's also a respect for research, leveraging the best of what's available. So it's a combination of knowing that things can work. So we look for things that have a strong evidence base that we know they can work on average, but that's not enough. Then we take improvement methodologies to say, okay, now how do we make this work in multiple contexts? Because that's the test of improvement. Not that it can work, but that it works everywhere.
Mm-hmm. So I hope that in sharing this with you today, again, we'll show the model that these colleges have used and what we've learned from their implementation, but that it also inspires some thinking about what reforms would look like on your campus and what kind of data you would need to not just evaluate that reform, but continue to improve it. So I hope it will help answer those questions. So a quick grounding in the structure of Statway and Quantway. Right now, students come in, right now, you know, the traditional sequence is that students take elementary algebra, then they'll take intermediate algebra, and then after they complete that, they can go on to take a college-level mathematics course. And if they finished all of that, if they're one of those 20%, they get their college math credit, right? Okay. So what we decided we would need to do is just break that structure. We know that we actually lose more students between classes than we do within classes. So can we remove the opportunity for them not to persist? That's one change. What we designed are two integrated pathways. So Statway is organized around statistics. Quantway is organized around quantitative reasoning. Statway is designed, both of these are designed for students who place into elementary algebra. Statway is designed as a year-long course that is focused on statistics from day one, but embeds within it college-level statistics. I should say that this course has the same learning outcomes as your existing college-level statistics course. All of the outcomes were designed by a committee of faculty from different institutions, including members of all of the math and stat professional societies and then vetted by those societies. So I don't want to show, I would hate for you to think that in this compression we have lost rigor, because that's not what's happened. We've actually engaged students in mathematics that they haven't been exposed to before. These are students in elementary algebra who most likely have taken that elementary algebra class before, a few times, and probably the same way. So they're experiencing mathematics in the same way that they have before and are continuing to not be successful. This gives them an entry point that's very different. Now all of a sudden they're learning statistics or they're learning quantitative reasoning, something that is contextualized and immediately relevant to them and that doesn't appear as the procedural mathematics that they've encountered before. It's a tenet of, or one of the design principles of this work is that the materials need to be inherently relevant and engaging. But back to the structure. So that's Statway. Quantway is designed actually slightly differently to allow flexibility for those colleges who said, you know, there are a number of students we serve that only want to complete their developmental mathematics requirements. And particularly our students who are looking for a certificate in career technical program. And don't really have the goal of a college-level course. So Quantway is designed in two pieces, the Dev Math, the equivalent of elementary and intermediate algebra in Quantway 1, that can then feed into a college-level Quantway 2 class or a college's existing quantitative reasoning or similar class. All right. So I'm going to skip straight to the results, and then I'm going to, that we've experienced, and then I'm going to go back into, well, what is this actually comprised of besides just that structure? Like, what did you actually have to do that was so different to get these results? All right, so first off, of those colleges that I said we're working with, we looked at the performance of their students in the traditional sequence. So we pooled all of that information, and we found that the 6% of students can complete elementary algebra, intermediate algebra, and a college-level course in a single year, or 6% do. So you may say, okay, well, that's not too surprising because that's a lot to get done in a single year, right? So let's go out 2 years and see how many students can get it done then. 15%. If you go out 3 years, it's 20%. And if you go out longer than that, it doesn't get any higher. Okay? So by comparison, the same students, elementary students who place into elementary algebra, who enrolled in Statway, 51% of them were successful in a single year. So we say we've tripled the success rate in half the time. These are descriptive statistics, and Chris is going to go into much more detail in a moment. We can really dig into the data together. Quantway shows similar results, but for simplicity's sake, I'm going to just speak about Statway right now. I think another very important component to this is those are the results in terms of student success in the course. But one of the elements of Statway and Quantway that we think is critical to success is how students' own beliefs about their ability in mathematics, as well as several other non-cognitive factors that we know affect student learning and student success. So it's not just whether they can do the mathematics, but it's a whole host of other factors that affect student success, like their sense of belonging, their confidence, their comfortableness in the class. And Statway and Quantway, based on extensive research, both with experts in the field and working with faculty on the ground, have developed and embedded specific interventions to address these specific factors. And what we see is a significant change in students' own perception of themselves, their ability to learn mathematics, and conception of themselves as learners. That is a benefit to them not only in this mathematics class, but throughout their career as learners in college and life. So here we've seen after an intervention in the first, or a series of interventions in the first 3 weeks of the course, this is when we know we really need to grab students, right? Because if we're going to lose students, when are we most likely to lose them is in those first 3 weeks. So this is where we want to concentrate our efforts. We can see that interest in mathematics has gone up. This is taken from data that we collect from our students. On the very first day of class, there's students take a background survey that gives us kind of a baseline measure of them across these different factors of productive persistence, what we call productive persistence. And then after the interventions, about 4 weeks later, along these same measures. So we can see their confidence has gone up, their sense of the relevance in the course has gone up, their anxiety has gone down, their sense of stereotype threat has gone down, and their belief that their intelligence about mathematics is fixed. So we know many students come into class thinking they're either a math person or they're not, and that's one of the things that we're able to change about them. The idea that they can actually grow their capacity to learn. It's a powerful thing. If you think that you're not a math learner and nothing's going to change that, then it actually wouldn't be a very good use of your time to invest in studying mathematics, right? I mean, that wouldn't be the logical thing to do. All right. So what is the Statway and Quantway actually comprised of in order to affect these kinds of results? Several components. So if we start kind of in the center in the classroom, there is a specific curriculum that we've talked a little bit about, engaging engaging students in authentic contexts immediately in an engaging manner. So students are asked to struggle with a difficult problem and to bring their own thinking and reasoning to bear on that problem as a way to kind of create a framework in their mind for the mathematics that they're then going to learn. So through active learning in groups, by first engaging in these rich tasks and then having supported activities with their class and their instructor. We're also very careful to make sure that through the curriculum, explicit connections are made between concepts within lessons, across lessons throughout the entire course, so that students are building on their learning over time and also creating flexible learning. Part of that comes through what we call deliberate practice. And this is a really intentional way that we design how students continue to expand their learning outside of class. So something very different from, now that I've learned this technique, I'm going to practice it a bunch. Instead, let's think really strategically about what types of problems would extend students' thinking and help them kind of build on what they already learned in class. So instead of a series of all the odd questions, you would have a couple of big contexts to encounter after class and several guiding questions within each of those contexts. I've already mentioned how the pedagogy is different as well. And instructor materials support faculty's use of or enlivenment of this pedagogy through the curriculum materials. I've also mentioned productive persistence as the attention to some of these non-cognitive factors. And the fact that there are specific interventions built into the curriculum materials for students to experience, but also instructional supports for faculty to learn how to use these interventions, because this is a very unique aspect of this program, and also something that I think most math faculty aren't used to attending to. I speak as math faculty myself in our own classes. And last I'd say is attention to language and literacy supports. So we know that if we're going to ask students to grapple with these rich tasks and authentic context, that there's going to be a reading demand and a communication demand that's really different from an algebra class. And so we want to make sure that students are supported well, that language isn't a barrier to them learning mathematics, but that they can actually extend to some extent their literacy skills as well. And again, not only is the curriculum designed to support kind of students' engagement in the mathematics within these contexts, but also there are instructional supports to help faculty use these tools as well. So I've spoken a lot about this embodying a very different way of teaching, and that necessitates professional development, a really robust system of support for faculty who would try teaching in a very different way. Right? This is very different from me standing at the front of the board like I used to do, kind of explaining how to do a problem and then asking students to do it as well. Instead, I'm asking students to try something on their own themselves and instead trying to facilitate their learning. So professional development is key here that we found. And the colleges that are engaged in this are really supported through the network by having mentor faculty who have done this for a while, work with them through online supports and through engaging with each other in an online community as well. So there's specific programs that we've developed that take place about 6 months prior to the launch of the course and all throughout that first year of teaching to provide these supports. And lastly, and I've already spoken about this to some extent, is the importance of us working together in a network. By having this common data infrastructure, we're able to learn the kind of things that you're about to hear about to help us collectively improve, but also help faculty. So give back information that we're finding is what's happening in the classroom and in the network to faculty to affect changes themselves. Something very powerful. So I want to, I'll just really quickly try to contextualize those numbers for you. So we started with what this means in terms of the percentage of students who are now successful, who hadn't been before, but I wanted you to hear a little bit in their own words what this meant to them. Okay, that's Sandra. really like Joe's here. He despised math, but now he's starting to show it off. And Rachel is her teacher here. And lastly, Ricky. Ricky had been held up in her degree because she just couldn't get through her math class. And she went from avoiding it to knowing that she had to get through it and then finding herself as an actual leader in the class. So this is a real transformation for students as well. So who are the students? And then I'll hand it to you. Who are these students? What do they look like? Well, 75% of them come in 2 levels. These are the students that we're actually teaching in the Statway and Quantway courses. So we know a lot about these students thanks to the institutional researchers that are part of the network and some of the information the students provide at the beginning of the course. So 75% are 2 or more levels below. A significant, that's really 2 or more levels below. There's a significant number of students who actually come in 3 levels below. And I think an interesting point that we found is that we haven't found a difference in effectiveness for those who come in 2 levels below or 3 levels below college ready. Isn't that interesting? Right, which may speak more to placement, I'm not sure. And of course, we know that they're not college ready as you would expect with reading either. In terms of maternal education and home language. These are students that we especially need to serve well. It's like Chancellor Rodriguez said this morning. We know so many of our students are first-generation college students. We know also that we have great diversity in our institutions and that we have a real opportunity here in terms of equity to make advances. So I think that prepares us well for what we'll see next.
So we've been really fortunate. Karon shared the descriptive statistics, 3 times the success rate in half the time for Statway. But one of the things that you can ask immediately is that a selection issue, right? Are we somehow, because we got a small handful of faculty who were true believers, and we slotted in all the students who are most likely to succeed? That was a concern we had from the beginning. And we looked at those things descriptively, looking actually at the characteristics in all of the cohorts, because all of the colleges are giving us 3 years of historical course taking, and then all students in credit-bearing courses as we go on with the pathways. So we can look at comparison groups, so we didn't think there was anything going on. But what we then did was use a technique called propensity score matching. This isn't done under random assignment, but we wanted to be able to make a strong causal statement about the efficacy of the pathways, and propensity score matching is basically the strongest method open to us given the program design. And so what we did is on about 44 characteristics, age, ethnicity, sex, the sort of things that are traditional demographics, but because we have lots of course-taking data, and the profile of our students is that they've very likely taken a number of courses before we see them in a pathways course, we've got a really pretty thick arc of what their prior course taking was, both in developmental courses and in non-developmental courses. So we're able to look at which courses, what levels were they placed in, what was their GPA, were their grades in those courses, what's their general GPA. So we're able to draw a pretty strong picture about what these students are like. And so what propensity score matching does is we took every student in each institution, every Statway student, Quantway, we did the same thing, and we matched them on these 44 variables to their 5 closest matches in the traditional dev math population. So we're looking at students who are, again, on the same arc, same age, same gender, to create a apples-to-apples comparison at each college. So this is then aggregating up, these results are aggregating up the matches at each college up to an institution, to a pathway-wide level. So that now for the last 3 complete cohort years, we've been able to sustain this triple the success rate in half the time. This is I can't see which button is which. Is that the laser? So this is in 1 year success rate. That's in 2 years. So 2 years in traditional developmental math versus 1 year in Statway. Now, I've looked at evaluated a lot of educational interventions. The other thing that happened here, and it may sound trivial to be really excited about maintaining that number, because what happened is we more than doubled the number of students. We more than doubled the number of institutions involved. We moved beyond the true believers that may have started at the beginning. We're moving in a number of colleges to a number of adjuncts. To be able to sustain the same level of performance while introducing more variation in the settings in which the program is being delivered, we think is also a pretty strong body of evidence. We're basically creating a body of evidence to say that we've gotten something that actually has some hope of working in multiple contexts because we've been able to sustain this level of performance despite the great increasing heterogeneity of the environments in which we're offering it. The other thing that we could have been concerned about, we've taken a hard look at language and literacy, at cultural relevancy, at the relevance of the materials to different groups, because we could have been worried that we're underserving some subgroups, right? The language isn't relevant, the examples don't engage students, and so this is the same comparative analysis. This is the most recent cohort. This is the 2013-14. It's the same for the earlier years as well. I just couldn't put that many bars on a chart, but that for men and for women, for the ethnic subgroups, we're delivering on at least 3 times the success rate in half the time for all the important subgroups. So in terms of an equity, making sure that we're tracking our equity obligation, that we're not missing some subgroups through some design problem or delivery flaw. So again, we've been really, really pleased to see these results and to see these things hold up over time. The other thing is, again, I've worked on lots and lots of evaluation projects. What I expect to see when I look at the rollout of an intervention, no matter how gold standard it might be, is I expect to see a bell-shaped curve. That the intervention works well in some of the places and is actually worse than the du jour treatment. This is, again, using this matched population, the comparison success rate by institution, each dot's an institution, is the success rate for the comparison students, traditional dev math, against the success rate for the students at that institution who were in Statway. And so in no institution was the intervention worse than twice as effective. And in some places it was phenomenally effective. Now, am I happy with this? I'm thrilled, absolutely thrilled that everything's over on the left side of the diagonal. From an improver's point of view, am I satisfied with that picture? Absolutely not. There's still enormous variation. And I still don't understand enough about what's going on. I've also got a really interesting, because this is an improvement network, we have people doing experiments. I've got 2 colleges here, one that's doing Statway in a single semester, and one that's doing it in a single 10-week quarter. And so I think, well, Karon told us first, one of the things we need to do is shorten let's go from 3 terms to 2, right? Because we're losing a lot of students in these transitions between. But then, I have to be really concerned about unintended consequences. When I go and look at the 1 semester and the 1 quarter, it's almost exclusively full-time students. It's not an option that seems to be open to many half-time students. It's so many credit hours. It's sort of a boot camp, sort of a developmental boot camp approach. And so while it's working, that it's clear that the Statway can be adapted effectively, I'm you need to be concerned that it closes the door for some students. So this is not going to be a de jure solution. It could be for your full-time students, though. So this is something that, while there's been some testing now, we're actually worried about. We call it balancing measures, sort of the unintended consequences of an innovation. So while it still seems to work, it's clearly not going to work for everybody given the life circumstances of our students. This is another thing we think about a lot in improvement, is we'll think about this. I told you the numbers. This year it's actually 53% was the success rate. So we start with 100% of the students in the beginning, the first day of the first term, and we end up with 53% succeeding with a C or better at the end. And that's great. But when I think about it from an improvement point of view, this isn't the story I need to look at. I'm interested in failure. Where does the system break? Where do I lose which students? And in improvement, we think about the Pareto principle. I'm going to go work where the biggest errors are because that's where I'm going to get the biggest bang for the buck. And for me, they fall into two big buckets. These are not the same kinds of errors. Succeeded in Statway 1, but didn't enroll in Statway 2, the second term. There's an administrative problem here. And when I look at this, it's about 18, of all the students I lose, it's about 18% of the students I lose. So I say, oh, I got to go work with the network to say, what in the world's going on? Why are we losing all these students? No, that's not the first step. The first step is I say, okay, that's an administrative class of problem. Where is it a problem? This is the 18 students. There's 2 not in here because of lack of administrative data. But for most of the schools in Statway, it's not a problem. 2 schools represent, 58 students of the 110 students I'm losing in between, right? That's over 50%. If I can solve the problem in those 2 schools, my average success rate goes up 5%. So I'm not trying to solve a systemic problem here. Now I'm going to go and put together leaders from these schools, and we're going to take a team, and we're going to go talk to leaders in those schools and say, what is it? And it may be a really significant administrative barrier that we can't overcome, but we're going to take the people who have not solved the problem and put them together with the people who have solved the problem and see if we can come up with a patch for that. Likewise, I've got things that are happening within the semester. People who failed Statway 1. People who withdrew. So again, 2 different things going on there. Some people who stayed through but weren't able to actually master the content. People that that weren't able to stay. So I've got different theories about what those might be, and we look at those things differently. So these are the sort of data we're starting to give back to faculty to think about how do we work on these specific problems. We take data from the online platform and basically create an engagement measure. Do I see that students are doing their homework? Karon talked about deliberate practice. Every day in class, there is deliberate practice to engage in. The online platform actually allows students to check their work. It provides hints. It connects them with other students who are working on the same thing. If they engage in students participate in at least some of this deliberate practice, their probability of success remains very high. If they don't, it's very, very unlikely that they'll succeed. Ultimately, this is actually succeed in the course with a C or better. So then there's a group working on explicit targeted interventions about how do we help students see the necessity of this and engage more effectively, or engage at all, in the deliberate practice we know is essential. Am I going to do this for the whole class? No. I need to find the students who are not engaging and work with them. I need a targeted intervention. Likewise, Karon talked about the productive persistence measures. So we do a survey in the very first week of class about sort of these basic 6 constructs in productive persistence. There's a whole series of both faculty interventions and then activities students engage in on their own that are designed to move students on these constructs. This is the dashboard for faculty so that they can so we can see it in the aggregate looking across with the large-scale data, but this is actually to help faculty to see their agency in this work. There's now this year we're also doing another survey at the end of the term because there's a new set of interventions about, okay, we started strong. We worked on these non-cognitive factors, on helping students with study strategies and the sort of behaviors you need to be successful in college. We worry that that degrades. We've actually got some evidence that it may degrade, so there's a whole series of interventions out that are different, that are about staying strong, that are about reinforcing these effective behaviors. And why do we do these things? Because we know that, so this is a summing up of the different risk factors. We saw them on that slide. If students are at high risk, so at risk on multiple factors, there's a strong and really ugly negative correlation with success in the course. So we know we need to have a strong statistical reasoning program here, but we also know that it's not enough, that we actually have to attend to these non-cognitive strategies or these non-cognitive factors if we want students to be successful. Yep.
One of the reasons that you may have a breakdown in certain points may be due to non-formality or non-consistency of your faculty training.
Oh, absolutely.
Did you consider that in looking at the two worst cases that you pointed out a moment ago?
Oh, in
where there was great success in two schools and great failure in two other schools, and you were to get the successful ones together with the unsuccessful ones.
Yeah, actually here what I'm going to do is faculty and administrators, because these are actually fairly large numbers.
Yeah.
And so my guess going in, I don't know for a fact, but I guess going in is I know that, so I know in one college, I know in this college here, there's some inconsistency between who's teaching in semester one. We make, the best practice is about a year-long pathway where the students and the faculty member actually make a contract with each other to be together for the year. Yeah. Some schools find that administratively challenging. And so I'm certain actually that I could be proved wrong, but I'm pretty certain that some of the variation there is going to actually come from that. Absolutely, and inconsistency in the faculty. Yep. I think that's the end of the data slides.
Should we pause there
Absolutely.
and ask for some questions about the data? Oh, I'm supposed to say, what questions do you have?
That's what you're supposed to say.
Not do you have any questions?
It's more welcoming.
Yeah. Do you have a question?
Do you have any data about the shorter courses, not the 2-semester courses, but the shorter courses?
Oh, Quantway? Yeah, it's just trying to shoehorn it all into an hour session. There's sort of the results are very similar. Quantway's, personally, it's a shorter treatment. It's only a term, it's taking developmental math and shortening it to a single term. It's about twice as effective in half the time. So there's that. The Quantway's a little bit harder to study in that because it's an accelerated developmental math sequence. Colleges are using Quantway very, very differently. And this is one of the things Karon talked about, students being placed in like 3 levels below. We have a number of colleges that are basically using Quantway as credit recovery. They only put students who failed 3 and more times, or put, and so, because they're making no headway at all with these students. And they say, well, Quantway's the strongest thing we know, let's stuff them all into there. So there is a little bit of variation in how Quantway is being used, but we see the same thing on efficacy across sex, ethnicity, and race. We see it consistently successful over time. I just couldn't.
Well, let's describe one piece of data that colleges get. So Chris showed the propensity score matching analysis results, and those are aggregate across the entire network. But I think what's really powerful is that each institution can see the exact analysis for their school.
Right.
And so that uncovered a situation in one of our colleges that they hadn't been aware of, because they looked at their success rate in Quantway and they said, I don't understand, we're working so hard and we're just not at the same level as the network. Why are we so low? Our faculty are doing all the right things. They're
looking at each other's classrooms. What are we doing?
Right.
We're watching each other's practice. We're doing this right.
Right. And the propensity score matching helped uncover what was going on, because when they looked at the students who were matched to their Quantway students on those 44 characteristics, they found those students had an 8% chance of success instead of more like 15%. And it started a conversation with the advisors at those schools, at that school. And it was through those conversations that they found out that it had only been the students who had not been successful before, who were least likely to succeed, that they targeted for Quantway.
Yeah, they basically put all of those students in Quantway.
So once they looked at their success relative to what it would have been for those students, it was actually quite remarkable. So it was actually 4 times what it would have been. So they got 4 times as many students through as if they had gone the traditional
The other
route.
thing I didn't put up here too, because it tends to be a complicated story to tell. The other thing I worry about a lot for terms of success, and this holds true for both Quantway and Statway. You could be worried, okay, I've got the learning objectives. We've got an externally validated assessment that actually measures the learning goals, and there's a big technical paper about that and all kinds of stuff on our website. But the proof is in the pudding. What happens for both Quantway and Statway students is they accumulate as many or more credits successfully, C or better, in the year following. Right? For me, is the acid test. Am I somehow not serving students well? Because again, if you think about in terms of where students were placed in these courses, I'm helping through many, many, many more students who would never have gotten through the developmental math path. And in the following year, they're accumulating as many or more credits than the folks that did make it through the traditional path.
Across disciplines, you're still focused on their success in subsequent math classes.
No, well, many don't take any I look at both their success. They actually do as well in subsequent math classes, but many of these students don't go on to take more. So you don't see a lot of additional math classes.
Describing as across disciplines?
Yeah, and so they accumulate more credit. This is a flat-out an ROI issue, a return on investment. These students are taking more credits, and they're successful. They persist at the institution. They're actually making progress on their academic lives. It's what you would hope would happen, right? As opposed to pounding away at developmental math and then suddenly, fading off into the sunset at some point when they just can't take it anymore, which is their only option otherwise.
I'd like to ask another question.
Yeah.
When you looked at the success in the other disciplines, did you control for the other, the characteristics that describe who would have naturally done better and taken more hours in that subsequent year? You know what I'm saying? If you look at different, parameters for the biometrics for the student population and so forth, did you control for that? And to try to understand whether it was Statway that caused this?
Oh, no, I don't. All I can tell you is that's what happens in the following year. Now, to the extent, they could, I've matched them on their history of 3 years and in the year in which they're in the comparison group in the year they take. So I'm looking at the comparison group and the Statway students in the year they take the pathway and in 3 years prior. Sure, they can differ in the following year, but I bet not a lot. I could look at it and look and see, actually come up with a metric for how much they differ, but these are students that I'm looking at 4 years of an arc. They're not going to deviate a ton in the following year. Now, again, this needs a lot more work, right? This is really, and I'm doing it across institutions, and so it's incredibly complicated. But again, this was one of those things, right? If we were somehow undermining student success, it would show up in credit accumulation in the following year. It's complicated too because I'm actually not observing some students because they transferred. This was the last thing they needed to actually be able to go to a 4-year program, and so I've got to. And because our students are in part-time, I want to look desperately at clearinghouse data. but it takes our students so long to get a credential. I've got to wait years before I can expect to see, I mean, I do expect to see these students showing up in clearinghouse data, but I mean, I just have to wait. So I'm coming up with things like credit accumulation in the following year is the strongest proxy I can have for persistence and success.
Talking about data, slicing and dicing, and proving that it works. When are we actually going to get into content? Things like, is it customizable? Is it available as an online course? Is it, as the chair of a math department, implementation issues and how things actually work is more what I'm interested in than hearing over and over that this is how well it works. Maybe I'm the outlier.
I would be happy to talk to you about that. You agree? Okay, great. And you guys feel free to chime in as well. So let me come back up here. So Statway and Quantway consist, the elements of the curriculum, I'll start there. And just keep asking me questions if I'm not answering all of the parts that you're interested in. But it's comprised of in-class lesson materials that have both student materials and instructor notes associated with that, and an online component as well. So the online component to reinforce what students learn in class, both before they get to class and to follow up after class on there. Within the in-class materials, so there are all of the questions that guide students through group work. There's homework as well, in class and online. And another piece of the online component materials are assessments. So ones that faculty use throughout the course to check for understanding and that students can use to check their own understanding. So really low stakes ways to check their learning. And then it's actually from students' engagement in this that we get the kind of data that Chris was showing about engagement and can give back to faculty some information about how their students are progressing through the class. So let me see what else. There's also an item bank that faculty use to create tests on their own in a way that fits their classroom. And then I think the really important piece is a common summative assessment. So all of the colleges in the network, their students take the same exam at the end, and that's an important way that we know how students are doing in learning against the learning outcomes for this course.
So customizability really isn't there. I mean, we could pick and choose, but the final assessment that you would like our students to take so that we can apples and apples across the system, see how our students are doing, may or may not align with what our college has decided is important or our state has mandated is important in the stats class.
Yeah, so there's no way that one size would fit all. So I'm going to agree with you. That's what I'm trying to say.
So the schools that have that issue their own exams and then have them take yours as well?
Here's what we see. Here's what we see colleges doing, is that this is very typical, right? If this is going to get through the curriculum committee on my campus, then I'm going to need to include this particular math here. Or I'm going to need to make some changes here, and faculty do that. I mean, what's great about the network is they share with each other what they're doing, so it's not a duplication of effort here. Yeah, so I would say, I don't know percentage-wise, but a number of the campuses have their own customized version of this that they're doing. And then what that means is they typically augment the summative assessment. So they use the core of that, or maybe the majority of that, but there's additional items that they want to ask as well. Just one last piece about that is, again, this isn't something, I mean, Carnegie took the lead in developing this, but this is something that's really developed in partnership with faculty. So a piece that, a part of that is actually the assessment work. So something really unique and higher in community colleges, at least, is having faculty who are trained to write assessments to write assessments appropriately. And so it's actually faculty in the network who go through their own professional development on this item writing, who then build the assessments that become these summative assessments.
So who pays for it? Is it like the replacement of a Pearson product or an Alex product or something like that that then is per student, and the student pays for access as much as the way they would pay for book and online content, or is this the institution that pays, or how does this work?
Yeah, there's
and
a bit of...
How much does it end up being per student?
Sure, there's a bit of both. So there is an institutional membership cost of $49,500 one time over the first 2 years. And that covers all of this professional development and all of the analysis that we've talked about and access to all of the materials. But there is also a student cost associated with accessing the materials. And that's somewhat set by the costs on your campus of students getting access to those materials. So we make everything available online to the students, and typically what colleges do is they take that and then have the materials printed and sold as well. So, yeah.
Do you have a feel what the per student price is out of pocket to them?
Sure. It varies by college, and it's different for Statway and Quantway. For Statway, this equivalent of the 3 classes comes, I think in most colleges, around $120 to students. So, yeah, a piece of that comes back to support the continued improvement. Okay, those were good practical questions. Yes.
So I have a question, and in some way it's related to what you were asking about, because I know I had been at a college that was part of Statway and moved to a college that is opposed to it. But, and I'm trying to show them the value of this, and I guess one of the things, this is out in California, is that the UCs, University of California, just accepted for a transfer some of the Statway programs, and admittedly, I'm an administrator rather than a faculty, so what you would probably see as a positive, I see a little bit as a negative, but so I went to look at some of these programs and the course outline of record to say, oh, well, let me see if I could bring some of these to the math department and explain, the changes and what happened, and there was, at least from what I was understanding, such tremendous variation in how the courses are designed. So for instance, it looked like some of them, it was 2 10-unit courses. In other ones, it was maybe a 5 and a 4 or 5 and a 3. So it does seem, when you asked about customization, there's a huge amount of that going on. And I guess sort of when I looked especially at something that's 20 units, I mean, that's more than, what we would do for, the normal 3-unit course that we would take, but it did seem like there was a huge amount of variation in what the 2 Statway courses were. So certainly the schools did do something differently, but it makes it harder to kind of bring a model to the institutions, just because they do seem to be very different in how they're approaching it in terms of the amount of times they expect the students to be involved.
Yeah, there is, I mean, there's no mandate here or right answer about the number of units or the number of credits. So we have seen colleges just instantiate this very differently on their campuses. So I think in that regard, yes, we do see a lot of variability. I think I'm not sure how much variability we see in the actual changing of the materials. There's some there as well, but I'm not sure that it's to the same degree as what we see in that case. But again, that allows flexibility for what faculty, the different needs that faculty see for their students, yeah. And then the exciting thing about the UC articulation is, it applied not only to all of the colleges already in California, but to the Carnegie model as it is right now, kind of the base model, yeah.
Yeah, even though the UCs have accepted it, the Cal State system still has not formally done that.
So in Cal...
In a lot of the feeder schools that we send students to, I mean, the colleges are Cal State, university, they're not UC system.
Right. So the point was about Cal State. So they are continuing to look at this and they review it. So hopefully they'll go to permanent acceptance as well. So they've been actually looking for some of the data that Chris just showed, which is hard to get over time, but what happens subsequently. And now that we're in our 4th year, we're beginning to get some of that data.
No, that's right. I mean, now we've got actually not just the persistence of Statway students, or the number of students in the CSUs, they're looking at their own data, but they're also now looking at the transfer students and looking at credit accumulation. They took Statway in a feeder community college and looking at their success and persistence in 4-year. I mean, actually, one of the hardest challenges we've had is in the CSUs has been the turnover of IRs, that they can't keep one for more than 20 minutes.
Just a question and comment I wanted to make, because I think your questions were good. Did the woman leave? Oh, man. Well, anyway, they were good questions. And I just wanted to say, when she was asking, is it like Pearson? And I'm only speaking for the SUNY system, where we have about 10 colleges that are engaged, but 4 who love this. And you're right, you have to be careful as you approach this, because some are questioning whether or not this is really the best thing since sliced bread. But it is not about buying a product like Pearson, where you have to pay forever. This is really about a different way of teaching. What I wanted to ask is if you could tell a little bit, for those of us who are less familiar with it, if you could tell a little bit about what the course experience is like. So you were mentioning how earlier it's not the same as, writing on a blackboard and saying this is the lesson and you should follow it up. Have you shared already what it's like, how it's different?
That's a great question. Anne, I'm going to ask if you want to talk about that. This is Ann Edwards. She heads up the work on faculty professional development.
Okay, so I'm going to take Johanna's question as an invitation to tell you a little bit about the pedagogy and what that means for what students actually experience in Pathways classrooms. So our pedagogical approach, which really undergirds the entire instructional system, so the curriculum and the pedagogy are well aligned to promote active learning, collaborative learning, and problem-centered and student-centered instruction. Really, it's what we're talking about. And the curriculum is designed in such a way that the problematic tasks are rich and they are problematic, meaning there's something actually to figure out there as opposed to just apply a bunch of procedures over and over again. And they are relevant to the students, meaning they can look at these problems and see, oh, wow, this is about compound interest. This might have something to do with the way I deal with my money, or it might have to do with their taxes, or it might have to do with the ways in which they understand salary raises and that kind of thing, things that are relevant to everyday life for them. So putting all those things together in terms of the curricular instructional context it promotes students' engagement, it promotes students' motivation, and it also is based on principles that promote deep and sustained learning of the mathematical concepts and procedures. So just in a nutshell, if for anybody who's interested, I can send you lots of stuff about this. But again, the curriculum design and the instructional principles, the pedagogical principles, are all grounded in decades of research in mathematics education, cognition, psychology, cross-cultural studies in psychology, and instruction. So it's deeply grounded in the stuff we know.
Thanks, Anne, and I realize we're already at time. So I put up their email so you can reach us to ask all kinds of questions, and there's a lot of information on our website, but I know we'll be happy to stick around to answer any more questions you might have. So thank you very much.